So POCO's under 30,000 champ in 2023 was the POCO F5. And now we already have a POCO X6 Pro, which is fantastic, under 30,000. Again, in 2024. So which one of these phones should you consider under 30,000 is the question that you guys wanted the answer for. And that's exactly what we're doing in this video. A detailed comparison of the POCO X6 Pro against the POCO F5. Let's get down to it. And if you're here for the first time, I'm Arshad. You're watching Trakin Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. So design-wise, again, looks are very subjective. So I will just throw it out there. Pick either one of the two depending on what you like. But if you ask me, I think the POCO X6 Pro looks a little staid, a little boring compared to the POCO F5, which has a much nicer design. But that's just my choice. Design is subjective, like I said once again. But if you're talking about the build quality, you've got a polycarbonate back, you've got polycarbonate frames on both. And the in-hand feel of both the phones are very similar. They're very boxy designs. The sizes are very similar. And even the weight difference is not very noticeable. Even right now, I'm holding it in my hand. They feel like the same phone actually. Now talking about functional advantages, the POCO F5 has a headphone jack, which the X6 Pro doesn't. The other thing is that the POCO X6 Pro has a slight bit of an advantage in terms of IP rating. You get IP54 on the X6 Pro, whereas you get IP53 on the POCO F5. And if you look at the ports and buttons situation, it's very similar. You've got the power button on the right, you've got the volume rocker. You've also got a proper stereo speaker setup, and you've got an infrared blaster at the top as well. That apart, on the front, you've also got Gorilla Glass 5 protection on both. Now technically, if you look at it with respect to functionality, there's not much separating the two except for the fact that the POCO F5 has a headphone jack. But design-wise, I'll throw the ball in your court. It's your choice entirely. Now, both the phones have the same 6.67-inch AMOLED display, but the POCO X6 Pro has an immediate advantage, and that is the fact that you get a higher resolution display and higher brightness, peak brightness as well. Now, talking about HDR support, you get HDR support on both YouTube and Netflix on both these phones actually. In fact, Netflix has Dolby Vision support as well. Xiaomi is the only brand. In fact, Xiaomi and POCO are the only brands that are providing Dolby Vision support at this price class. Now, considering the fact that the POCO X6 Pro actually supports a higher peak brightness, when you're watching HDR content, it's brighter than the POCO F5, that's for sure. And even when you take it outdoors, the brightness and legibility is slightly better on the POCO X6 Pro compared to the POCO F5. But one thing we noticed with the POCO F5 is that the display has been tuned slightly better in terms of color reproduction compared to the POCO X6 Pro. The X6 Pro actually has the original Pro Color mode, but it's not as accurate when you're watching HDR content. Now, with respect to touch sampling rate, you've got 240 Hz of touch sampling rate on both these phones, but the POCO X6 Pro can go up to 480 Hz in the Wild Boost gaming mode, and it can actually reach a peak, instantaneous touch sampling rate of 2160 Hz, especially when you're gaming. Now, while these are numbers being thrown around, when we did play on both these phones, we couldn't really immediately discern the difference in the touch response rate. Both seem to be absolutely fine. To close out the multimedia setup, you've got a proper stereo speaker setup on both the phones, and of course, you've got Dolby Atmos support as well. We listened to both side by side, and what we noticed is that the POCO X6 Pro is slightly richer in terms of details. Take a listen for yourself and let me know what you guys think. Haptic feedback is very similar on both the phones with the X-axis linear motor. There's nothing separating the two. It's crisp, it's tight, it's very good. High-res Bluetooth codecs like LHDC and LDAC are supported on both. But of course, POCO F5 has that headphone jack, and you get high-res, wired music by directly connecting, a wired earphone. But if you're using a POCO X6 Pro, you will need to buy that dongle, the Type-C to 3.5mm dongle, for you to be able to use wired earphones. But even if you use a dongle, you get high-res audio support on this, which is good. One advantage on the X6 Pro is that you've got an in-display fingerprint scanner now, as opposed to the POCO F5, which has a side-mounted fingerprint scanner. Honestly, both are really fast to unlock, so you can't really tell the difference. But, I don't really have a preference for, where the fingerprint scanner is mounted, as long as it can unlock the phone really fast. What's your preference? Let me know in the comments below. Now, with respect to the display, there are clear upgrades to the POCO X6 Pro, especially in terms of the resolution and the brightness, and of course the touch sampling rate as well. The numbers have definitely shot up, and you can see the difference, especially in brightness when you're using it side by side. But the POCO F5 has one nice advantage that I do appreciate, is that it's more color accurate as a display compared to the POCO X6 Pro. Alright, let's talk about the performance. Under 30,000, when the POCO F5 launched last year with the Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2, the only phone to have that, it was a game changer because you got an Antutu score of over 1.1 million. Well, POCO has gone and changed that. that this time around with the POCO X6 Pro, which has an Antutu score of over 1.4 million, and it's with the new Dimensity 8300 Ultra. And the best part about this phone is that you also get UFS 4.0 storage and LPDDR5X RAM. In comparison, the POCO X6 Pro had LPDDR5 RAM and UFS 3.1 storage. So obviously when you check the storage read-write speeds, it's much better on the X6 Pro compared to the F5s. Even in Geekbench, what you notice is that the multi-core score is higher on the X6 Pro compared to the single-core score, which seems to be higher on the Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 inside the POCO F5s. We of course also ran our standard CPU throttle test where we engaged 40 threads for 30 minutes, and what we noticed is that the CPU stability is higher on the POCO X6 Pro, and it's running at a higher average GIPS as well, which means that it's performing at a higher peak performance rate. Now when we played Genshin Impact at the highest settings, 60 FPS and for 30 minutes, what we noticed is that the average frame rates was very similar. We got 56.2 on the POCO X6 Pro, whereas we got 56.6 on the POCO F5. Of course, in intense battle scenes, both these phones tend to struggle slightly and the frame rates drop to about 40-44. Having said that, the POCO X6 Pro definitely got hotter than the POCO F5. The POCO F5 runs cooler for longer gaming sessions compared to the POCO X6 Pro. The X6 Pro doesn't get unbearably hot or anything, but compared to the POCO F5, it runs hotter. Also, one thing we noticed is that you can play BGMI at smooth 90 FPS on the X6 Pro, but you cannot play HDR Extreme, which is possible on the POCO F5. I think the game just needs to be updated for it to run at HDR Extreme on the POCO X6 Pro. Even if you look at performance very similar to the design, there's very little separating the two except for the fact that yes, the POCO X6 Pro has a slightly more powerful processor. And of course, the storage speeds are faster, the RAM speed is faster too. So that definitely will make a slight bit of difference in daily usage, but most people won't be able to tell the difference. So I would say it's a tie, but if you're into gaming and if you want the phone to run cooler for longer gaming sessions, then I think the POCO F5 still continues to be better than the POCO X6 Pro. Now, with respect to network connectivity, one huge advantage on the POCO X6 Pro is that you get support for NFC. So tap away with Google Pay, which is obviously not possible on the POCO F5. And you also get support for 14 5G bands on the X6 Pro compared to 12. It's a little bit of an upgrade. And when we tested the phones out, the 5G performance was very similar. The call quality also was very similar. There's nothing separating the two. But if you're looking purely at the features on offer, then the X6 Pro definitely offers you more than the F5 in terms of network and radio connectivity. The battery on the POCO F5 and the X6 Pro is the same, 5000 mAh. And the charging speeds are also the same, 67 watts. So both these phones take about 40 minutes for a full charge. However, it's clear to us after testing that the POCO F5 offers better battery life than the POCO X6 Pro. Unfortunately, MIUI on the F5 and HyperOS on the X6 Pro do not offer screen on time, but we do have some data. Essentially, after a full day's worth of testing and benchmarking and usage, the POCO F5 had more battery life left, about 29% left compared to the POCO X6 Pro, which had about 16% left. Now, the advantage of the POCO X6 Pro is that it's the first phone in India to launch with HyperOS out of the box. Of course, it's not too different from MIUI, but HyperOS comes with Android 14, and when you're promised 3 years of software updates and 4 years of security updates, you will get 15, 16, and 17. Whereas the POCO F5 has MIUI 14 based on Android 13, and POCO had only promised 2 plus 3 years of updates, which means that you will get Android 14 and 15. That's about it. Now, when you're looking at the software experience, I've spoken about it at length. There are a lot of bloatware apps, and of course, there are a lot of dark patterns in the setup process as well. In fact, even after you start using the phone. Of course, all of these bloatware apps can be uninstalled, and that's the price you have to pay for, POCO having to keep the cost low. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. You won't get a very clean software experience like you would with OxygenOS on OnePlus, or you would get with MyUX based, experience on Motorola phones. But you know what? The HyperOS experience on the X6 Pro is damn nice. It's fast, it's smooth, it's a very light install, so it doesn't take up too much storage space as well. I really want to wait for that stable, HyperOS update for the POCO F5. And there are quite a lot of features that are some useful, some not, depending on what you like. Of course, there's that, wallpaper magazine effect now you've got with the depth effect, which is very, very well tuned. That apart, you've also got the dynamic island-like notification when you're charging. You've also got floating windows, which can be resized now. So there are a lot of things. It's not like MIUI 14 doesn't have feature, but HyperOS is the latest version, so it's definitely better. Now, if you care about software experience and the latest software experience, it goes without any doubt that you must pick the X6 Pro over the POCO F5 right now. And now, with respect to the camera setup, you've got the same camera setup on both, 50 plus 8 plus 2 and a 69-big selfie camera on the front. But of course, the camera sensors are different. You can take a look at that for yourself on the screen. Now, if you're done checking that out, let's get down into, which one takes better pictures. Now, when it comes to details, I was quite surprised to see that despite both phones using the exact same lens, the X6 Pro sample turns out to be a bit less detailed compared to the POCO F5 sample. So after seeing this, I checked the metadata of both the samples and I found that POCO F5's image size is slightly higher higher compared to the X6 Pro. So the algorithm seems to be tuned slightly differently for both the phones, where the F5 definitely is pulling out more details compared to the X6 Pro. You also do get an in-sensor crop of 2x on both the phones, and of course the POCO F5 captures more detailed shot compared to the X6 Pro. Now talking about color reproduction, the X6 Pro actually produces slightly closer to natural looking colors compared to the F5, which tends to oversaturate. HDR processing is definitely better on the X6 Pro compared to the POCO F5, that's for sure. So what you do get is a better control over the highlights, where the highlights aren't blown out like they are on the POCO F5. In fact, the POCO X6 Pro also pulls out more details from the shadows. So yeah, HDR is better on the X6 Pro compared to the F5. And when you're shooting friends and family, the X6 Pro skin tone is much better than the POCO F5 skin tone. It's not like the X6 Pro is very neutral, but still it's better than the F5, at least when you're shooting in direct even lighting. Now when you look at it, the skin tones are actually slightly more warm and reddish on the POCO F5 compared to the POCO X6 Pro. But then again, when you look at a closer crop of the face, you will see more details on the F5 compared to the X6 Pro. And talking about the ultra-wide angle camera samples, the 8MP ultra-wide sample on the F5 is more detailed compared to the POCO X6 Pro. This could also boil down to the fact that the F5 actually has the Sony ultra-wide sensor compared to OmniVision on the X6 Pro. But one thing that we notice is that the ultra-wide angle and primary camera color sense consistency is more accurate on the X6 Pro compared to the F5. It doesn't have that many misses like the F5 does. And that could also be because POCO seems to be working really hard on the algorithm and to improve the algorithm, because the HDR performance is better, the color sense consistency is better. Even if it's using inferior hardware or the processing is inferior in terms of details, at least you get more reliable shots from the X6 Pro compared to the POCO F5. Even in low light, if you look at it, the POCO X6 Pro captures more details and more light and more exposure compared to the POCO F5. Also, if you look at the darker portion of the wall, you will notice green chromatic aberration in the F5 shot, which is not there on the X6 Pro, which tells you that the algorithm is better tuned on the X6 Pro compared to the POCO F5. In fact, even with the low light ultra-wide shots, the POCO X6 Pro actually performs better than the POCO F5. I expected the F5 to be better, but X6 Pro seems to be performing better. Now, macros are of course captured at 2 megapixel resolution. They're very similar on both, and they're both pointless. It's no point adding these cameras, honestly. In terms of selfies, the POCO F5 seems to be better than the POCO X6 Pro. There's a lot of over sharpening in the POCO X6 Pro, especially when you look at Arnav's hair. And the F5 seems to be better in terms of skin tones, details, and colors while taking a selfie. But selfie HDR, the POCO X6 Pro is a clear winner. Yes, it looks kinda over-processed, but it does a better job of controlling the highlights and not blowing it out, which the POCO F5 does. Now, talking about selfie portraits, if you're looking at the edge cutout and the semantic segmentation, then the X6 Pro is better than the POCO F5. But the F5 seems to have better skin tones and white balance, but still edge cutout is something that we're checking out over here, so the X6 Pro is better than the F5. However, when you're capturing selfies in low light, then the X6 Pro seems to be performing better than the F5. Now, in video recording, the one advantage that the POCO X6 Pro has is that you can actually shoot 4K 30fps HDR videos, which is the max resolution, by the way, 4K 30fps, whereas on the POCO F5 you can shoot 4K 30fps, but you do not have the HDR option. And in general, the high dynamic range performance of the X6 Pro's video is definitely way better compared to the POCO F5. Stabilization, although very similar on both, there's nothing to complain, but I did notice a gelling effect in the stabilization of the POCO X6 Pro compared to the POCO F5, which seems to be slightly more stable. And when you're shooting videos, the POCO X6 Pro also seems to be capturing more details, and apart from that, you also do get a higher bitrate audio recording, which means that the audio recording quality is also really good. Take a listen for yourself and let me know what you guys think.
This video is shot using the POCO X6 Pro and the POCO F5. This video is shot using the POCO X6 Pro and the POCO F5.
Now, even when you're shooting with the ultra-wide angle lens, the POCO X6 Pro is better compared to the POCO F5. We'll notice, less noise, and the image is quite sharp too. Even the selfie camera video recording is of better quality compared to the POCO F5. It offers better details, better skin tones, and better stabilization as well. So overall, if you look at it, the POCO X6 Pro clearly has a better camera compared to the POCO F5. Now, I'll put it straight and simple because I've gone into all the details. I'm not going to go into that again. See, the POCO X6 Pro seems to be the better buy compared to the POCO F5 right now. There are three main reasons for it: better display, better camera, and better software experience. But the most important reason is the fact that the POCO X6 Pro is actually more affordable than the POCO F5. Of course, the POCO F5 has slightly better battery life and slightly more stable performance, but that's not too much of an advantage for me to pick the POCO F5 over the X6 Pro. Of course, the X6 Pro is also the newer phone, so POCO has had time to make it better. Which one do you like? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.